Sarah and Daniel Thompson lived in a quiet, friendly neighborhood where everyone seemed to know everyone. Their house sat on a peaceful street lined with tall trees and well-kept gardens. To the outside world, their life looked close to perfect. Daniel was a well-respected accountant, known for his honesty and calm nature. He worked long hours but always found time to make Sarah feel special. Whether it was weekend trips, surprise dinners, or simple thoughtful gestures like leaving notes. In her lunch, Daniel showed his devotion every day. Sarah, on the other hand, had built her own image in the community. She was friendly, always smiling, and often the one to organize neighborhood events. People admired the way she seemed to balance everything so well. She was seen as supportive, loving, and always by Daniel's side. When the two walked together, neighbors believed they were looking at a couple deeply in love. Daniel's friends often said he was lucky to have such a wonderful wife. He believed it too. From the early days of their relationship, Daniel had been drawn to Sarah's charm. He trusted her completely, never suspecting that beneath her pleasant appearance, something far more dangerous was growing. Over time, Daniel had inherited a considerable sum of money from a distant uncle he rarely spoke about. It was life-changing, and Daniel saw it as an opportunity to build a better future for both of them. He planned to invest most of it, buy a new home, and start the family they had talked about for years. Sarah appeared happy with the plan. She handled many of their day-to-day financial matters, and Daniel never questioned her choices. He believed their life together was safe and steady. The couple was often seen jogging in the mornings, having coffee on their porch, and hosting quiet dinners for friends. Nothing about them raised suspicion. They seemed connected like two people who had carefully built a life filled with comfort and trust. Daniel loved routine. He enjoyed his work, his quiet evenings at home, and the weekends spent with Sarah. For him, life didn't need to be exciting or filled with surprises as long as it was with her. He had no idea that behind the life he treasured, Sarah had started walking a very different path. She wasn't as satisfied as she pretended to be. While Daniel worked late, she found herself seeking attention elsewhere. It started small, but over time, Sarah became deeply involved with another man, someone who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. Instead of facing the growing distance in her marriage, she built a web of lies to protect her secret life. Daniel, blinded by trust, continued to hand over financial control to Sarah. She managed their shared bank accounts, paid their bills, and quietly began moving money into an account Daniel knew nothing about. She was careful. Each transaction was made in a way that wouldn't immediately attract attention. Sarah thought she was smarter than anyone around her, including her husband. Her life became a balancing act, carefully managing appearances while keeping her secret hidden. Daniel, however, was content, still dreaming of the bigger house, the children they would one day have, and the peaceful life he believed they were building together. The signs were there, but he didn't see them. He didn't notice the long phone calls Sarah would quickly end when he entered the room, or the evening she claimed to be meeting friends, but instead went somewhere else. Daniel's devotion blinded him to the cracks quietly spreading through their marriage. He believed he was safe, but the life he thought he knew was already slipping away. It was a quiet evening when Daniel sat in his home office, sorting through a stack of paperwork that had been waiting for his attention. His job as an accountant made him naturally curious about numbers, and while reviewing their household finances, something unusual caught his eye. There were multiple large cash withdrawals he couldn't remember making. At first, he thought it might be an error, but as he flipped through the statements, the pattern became too clear to ignore. The money had been steadily disappearing over several months, always in amounts small enough to seem harmless on their own, but significant when added together. Confused, Daniel pulled older bank records and compared them. His heart began to race as he realized Sarah had been slowly draining their accounts. He thought about all the times he trusted her with their finances, never once questioning her honesty. His mind filled with worry and disbelief. Why would she need this money? Where was it going? Determined to find answers, he started checking other records, credit cards, hotel bookings, and receipts that had been casually left in drawers. What he found left him frozen in place. There were multiple hotel reservations under Sarah's name, all at the same hotel, always booked for 2 guests. The dates lined up with nights she claimed to be out with friends or at work events. The evidence grew more painful as Daniel continued digging. He found messages on an old shared tablet they rarely used. They weren't addressed to him but to someone else, someone Sarah had been seeing regularly. She had been living a double life right under his nose, carefully hiding it for as long as she could. Daniel's world shattered as he pieced it all together. The love he believed was real, the life he thought was solid, had all been a carefully crafted lie. The woman he trusted above all else had betrayed him in the most personal way. His mind raced as he thought about what to do next. Should he confront Sarah? Should he go to the police? Should he tell their friends? But each time he considered his options, the weight of sadness crushed him. He didn't want to believe this was his reality. He replayed years of memories, trying to find the moment when things began to fall apart. But it was impossible to trace. Sarah had been careful, always making sure her secret life was well hidden. As the shock settled into his bones, Daniel knew he couldn't ignore what he had found. The man who had built his entire life around trust and love now stood surrounded by evidence that everything he believed was a lie. He realized he was not just betrayed emotionally, but also financially. The money he worked so hard to secure for their future had been slipping away into Sarah's hidden world. His safe, peaceful life had collapsed in an instant. He never expected that uncovering a few missing dollars would lead him to the darkest truth about his marriage. Sarah quickly sensed that something had changed in Daniel. He became distant, quieter than usual, no longer the man who filled their home with warmth and easy conversation. His routines continued, but his energy had shifted. He no longer asked her where she was going, nor did he offer to join her on her evening outings. He moved through the house like a shadow, keeping his thoughts to himself. Sarah felt the tension rising around them and realized that Daniel might have discovered her secret. Fear began to build inside her. She knew if Daniel fully uncovered everything, it wouldn't just end their marriage, it would ruin her carefully constructed new life. She had invested months in protecting this second life, moving money, and laying the groundwork for a clean escape. She could not afford for Daniel to expose her. As the days passed, Sarah's fear turned to cold determination. The life she wanted was within reach, but Daniel's discovery now stood in her way. She convinced herself there was no turning back. Sarah carefully mapped out every step, thinking through each detail to avoid suspicion. She planned not only the act itself, but also how she would present herself to the world afterward. She understood that pretending to be a grieving, desperate wife would buy her time and sympathy. On the night she chose, the house was unusually silent. Daniel sat alone in the living room, his face heavy with the weight of what he had learned. He seemed unaware of Sarah moving around the house, gathering what she needed. She approached him from behind, steady and without hesitation. In that moment, Sarah crossed a line that could never be undone. What followed was fast, brutal, and final. When it was over, Sarah stood in the quiet house, staring at what she had done, breathing heavily but feeling an odd sense of control. She acted quickly. She knew she had no time to waste. She wrapped Daniel's body carefully, avoiding leaving traces behind. She dragged him to the garage, her hands shaking but her mind focused. She placed his body in the trunk of his car, making sure everything looked undisturbed from the outside. In the dark, she drove far beyond the familiar streets of their neighborhood, past small towns, and into the edges of a thick forest where almost no one passed by at night. Sarah found a remote spot where the trees grew dense and tall, their branches forming a natural shield. She dug with bare hands and a small shovel she brought from home, working until her muscles ached and the hole was deep enough to conceal what she had done. She buried Daniel there, covering the ground with fallen leaves and twigs to hide any sign of disturbance. She returned home just before dawn, exhausted but driven by the need to finish her plan. Inside the house, she cleaned every surface, carefully scrubbing and removing anything that could link her to the crime. She erased digital traces where she could, knowing what investigators would eventually look for. When morning came, she began her performance. She made frantic phone calls to friends and neighbors, claiming Daniel hadn't returned home. She filed a missing person report, crying on the phone, her voice breaking as she described her fear and confusion. Sarah printed missing flyers with Daniel's smiling face and posted them across town, speaking to the media, pleading for help. She joined search parties, walking side by side with people who believed her. Her carefully staged sorrow fooled almost everyone. Sarah's deception was complete, at least for now. To the outside world, she was a heartbroken wife desperately searching for her husband. Behind closed doors, she felt a cold satisfaction, believing she had escaped the consequences. She thought she had created the perfect story, but the smallest cracks in her carefully built lie were already beginning to form. At first, Sarah's story seemed to hold together perfectly. She told the police that Daniel had gone for an evening walk and never came back. She described his habits, where he liked to go, and even mentioned the nearby park as a place he often visited to clear his mind. Her performance appeared convincing. She cried during interviews and clutched the missing flyers tightly in her hands. The neighbors supported her, genuinely believing she was a devastated wife. Search parties spread across the town calling out Daniel's name and placing posters on street poles, coffee shops, and bus stops. Sarah walked among them, pretending to search, pretending to hope. The police began their investigation by retracing Daniel's last known steps. They checked surveillance cameras along his supposed walking route, but something didn't fit. There was no footage of Daniel leaving the house that evening, no sign of him on the streets, and no one had seen him in the neighborhood that night. His car remained in the garage for days, untouched. His keys, wallet, and phone were all found inside the house, exactly where he would have left them if he never intended to go out. These small details began to puzzle the investigators. Sarah, unaware of the gaps forming in her story, continued her act. She attended every community meeting, giving emotional speeches, and thanked volunteers for their efforts. But her story soon began to crack under closer scrutiny. Investigators pulled her financial records and found several unexplained cash withdrawals in the months leading up to Daniel's disappearance. The amounts were too large to ignore. They also discovered that Sarah had continued booking the same hotel even after Daniel had supposedly gone missing. This raised immediate suspicion. The detectives expanded their search and found the man Sarah had been secretly seeing. Under questioning, the man admitted his relationship with Sarah. He explained that Sarah had complained about her marriage for months, saying she felt trapped and wanted to start over. He claimed he didn't know where Daniel was and denied being involved in anything illegal. But he told the investigators something that changed the course of the case. He revealed that Sarah had made several unsettling comments about wanting to solve her problem and how life would be easier if Daniel was simply gone. The detectives now focused all their attention on Sarah. They carefully examined her phone records and GPS data. They noticed a suspicious trip on the night Daniel vanished, a journey that took Sarah far outside the city and back in the early morning hours. She had never mentioned this to the police. The area she had visited was isolated and heavily wooded. The discovery of this trip raised serious alarms. Forensic teams searched Daniel's car, which Sarah claimed had not been used since his disappearance. They found traces of dirt and plant material in the trunk, samples that did not match the soil from their home or neighborhood, but closely matched the kind of soil found in the remote forest Sarah had visited. When the police returned to the ConfessionThe location, they conducted a wide search and eventually uncovered a shallow grave. Daniel's body was discovered, carefully hidden under a thick layer of leaves and earth. The investigators now had enough evidence to confront Sarah. The story she had carefully built collapsed almost instantly. The public who had once supported her felt shock and betrayal. Sarah, who had appeared to be a grieving wife, was now exposed as the person responsible for Daniel's death. The missing flyers, the tearful speeches, the search parties, all had been part of her plan to hide the truth. The investigation that had begun as a search for a missing husband was now a murder case that would soon make national headlines. The discovery of Daniel's body shattered the quiet suburban community that once believed in Sarah's grief. The story spread quickly through local news and social media, turning the case into a national sensation. People struggled to understand how a woman who had appeared so devoted and heartbroken could have been responsible for such a calculated crime. The neighbors who had once stood beside her, hanging missing flyers and joining search parties, now distanced themselves, horrified by the truth that had surfaced. With overwhelming evidence in hand, the police arrested Sarah at her home. She offered little resistance, as if she knew the facade she had carefully maintained was finally crumbling. During the interrogations, Sarah at first denied everything, repeating the story she had told since the beginning. But the mountain of facts weighed heavily against her. The surveillance footage, the financial records, the hidden relationship, the GPS data, and the forensic evidence from Daniel's car all pointed directly to her. The pressure became too great to bear, and Sarah eventually confessed. She admitted that, when Daniel discovered her secret, she saw no way out. She had built her future on lies and betrayal, and Daniel's knowledge would have destroyed everything she had worked to secure. She explained that she had planned his death carefully, ensuring that no one would immediately suspect her. The missing flyers, the desperate phone calls, and the emotional television appearances were all part of her plan to redirect suspicion and buy herself time. She believed she could outsmart everyone. She believed she could live the life she wanted. without facing the consequences. The courtroom was packed during Sarah's trial. The evidence was laid out in detail, piece by piece, revealing the depth of her deception. Prosecutors described how Sarah had carefully drained their finances, manipulated those around her, and coldly disposed of Daniel when he became a threat to her plans. The man she had been secretly involved with also testified, describing the conversations they had shared and the unsettling remarks Sarah made about wanting her husband gone. His words painted a picture of someone who had been preparing for this outcome long before the night she acted. The jury took little time to reach their verdict. Sarah was found guilty of murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her life, once carefully arranged with layers of lies, now reduced to a prison cell where there would be no more pretending. The community that once admired her was left in shock, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the cold truth that had emerged. Daniel's story became a painful reminder of how deeply trust can be broken. He had devoted his life to Sarah, never questioning her loyalty, never doubting her intentions. His love, his future plans, and his unwavering faith in his wife had all been met with betrayal. The missing flyers with Daniel's face, which once symbolized hope, were now seen as symbols of Sarah's deception. They remained taped to lampposts and shop windows for weeks after the case closed, a haunting reminder of what had truly happened. In the end, the tragedy wasn't just about a life lost. It was about how easy it can be to hide darkness behind a smile, how even those closest to us can carry secrets capable of destroying everything. Daniel's memory lived on as the community mourned not just his death, but the painful lesson his story left behind.